Manhattan Stardust, Chapter 2, Psychology. Go modern, chimed in Jasper over my shoulder. Even better, go postmodern. You mean like your poetry? Exactly. He missed the irony. Move it around a bit. Do the time travel thing. Back and forth, fragments. Remember, you're writing for the strong reader. What's a strong reader? A reader who reads most of the words? A reader who reads between the lines, or, better yet, between the paragraphs, if you have any. But this is just a letter, Jasp. Make it an epistle. I don't want to make it anything except a simple explanation. Oh, in that case, good luck. And then he was off, leaving me to my limited devices. I admit, if you kept your eyes glued to the surface and nothing but, things looked a certain way. That's where my letter came in. Context, subtext, the real goings-on. What made it hard, aside from having to live in Queens, where the closest thing for miles to natural green was a punk rocker's hair, I suppose I should be grateful to him and to Emilio, even if Emilio, being a co-worker and co-friend of Miranda's, wasn't speaking to me. Where was I? Oh, yes, gratitude. It's difficult to be grateful with so many cats around. I shared the same aversion to cat hair that Jennifer did. And what made it worse was having to be reminded of Jennifer every time I picked one out of my coffee, and then being reminded of all the other stuff we had in common, and that I had in common with Miranda, and that Miranda and Jennifer and I had in common together with each other, like the apartment in town, which I was now excluded from indefinitely. The irony of it. And irony, like honesty, was something to be approached with caution, was that it wasn't even my fault, as I'll try to explain. Before Dad had attracted the kinds of clients, big-time suspects, that is, who could support family vacations in Maine, we once drove down to a place in Jersey called Wildwood for a 2-week stint on the beach that included a day at the water park on the boardwalk. My sister was charged with my care, which, at the age of 13, wasn't much of a thrill for her because she treated me like a ball and chain, though strictly speaking I was probably more like a magnetic force field that kept the 18-year-old predators she flirted with away from her. Instead of being grateful, she dragged me up to the biggest and tallest slide of them all and dared me to do something that was absolutely terrifying for an 8-year-old. And before I could say no or start to cry, she nudged, and before I could do anything else, I was hurtling down a chute with no way to do anything else but slide so fast my stomach had gone to my head. The point of all this is that there's a point where there's simply no point at all about trying to resist certain fates. Sabrina had nudged me again, and Svetlana had the personality and curves and legs and sheer electrifying energy of Jennifer and Miranda wrapped into one, plus she was blonde. What could you expect me to do? What would you expect anyone to do? Anyway, the night before Sabrina's departure home, I had made the decision to forget about Svetlana and her accoutrement altogether. It just so happened that Svetlana had called me at work for some accounting advice, necessitating a quick jaunt to the Hamptons where she had digs, courtesy of the combined prenuptial resources of 2 exes, an orthopod and neurosurgeon. With a little black and white arithmetic, I managed to save Svetlana, at the expense of the IRS, quite a bundle. Her appreciation knew no bounds, and what with her curves and legs and sheer drug-rep effervescence, my gratitude kicked in. Had my sister not decided in a fit of honesty to phone a few weeks after she returned to the West Coast and let us all know what a wonderful visit she had had, and to remind me how thrilled Svetlana was to have gotten to know me so well, all this on voicemail, Shangri-La would be filled with springtime cheer rather than wintry malcontents. Miranda, for all her anti-bourgeois ideals, and Jennifer, for all her anarchic childhood growing up, fell upon convention. I admit I went AWOL, but only twice, and I didn't think ostracism was the sympathetic response. Call it a sabbatical, said Miranda. If not a permanent vacation, added Jennifer. What did I do to deserve this? I asked. That ended the conversation, which wasn't my intent. So here I was in the doghouse full of cats, miserable enough almost to beg my father for a stay at his place, despite the lurking peril of Geneviève and her Frenchness and lack of occupation besides daily yoga and shopping. As I was contemplating the predicament, Jasper breezed back into my cell, apparently with Emilio's permission, and I showed him what I had managed to scribe. I'm sorry. Can we please meet? I like it, said Jasper. Crisp, laconic, and clear. Do you think they'll bite? They've already bitten. But if you mean, do I think they'll give you another chance? Probably not. I wouldn't. Gee, thanks. Here, give it to me and don't say anything to Emilio. I'll sound them out. And I'll hand it to Jasper. He went to bat for me and lined a single into right field. The meeting was on, and to soften the proceedings, he would be my chaperone. What did you do? What did you tell them? I asked. Don't worry about it. Let's get to work on your prep. My prep? Yeah, this won't be easy. Trust me, Gary. I'm putting myself on the line for you. Go along with the program. What program? The program. I'm telling you. You've got to look the part. Contrite, but not submissive. Get it? Aim for confused and sheepish, too, but mostly confused. Try to recall some episode like, do you remember a time in your life when you felt unjustly accused of something and yet guilty at the same time, possibly when you were 5? Huh? Forget it. You'd be impossible to direct. And after a theatrical pause during which he was no doubt calling upon his brief theatrical experience as amateur director of a tempest that turned out to be a wash, he went on. I'll keep it simple, Gary. Be yourself. You're confused more often than not anyway. Just don't breathe a word about that damn duende. They'll slaughter you and me both. It's not cute anymore. But bring some spare underwear and a toothbrush. The 5 days it took for Saturday evening to roll round felt like 10 years, and when it finally did, the weather outside may have been warm and delightful, but the atmosphere at headquarters was frightfully cold. I'd half expected a reception along the lines of the prodigal son, even though I was more prodigal peer, but no dice. All I could do was shrug like a lost penguin at the pole, so Jasper gave my head a pat and launched in on my behalf. I should mention that he had a bit of history with each of the girls, and I hoped for the better memories to have some sway. Ladies, he began with a lisp I had never heard before, there's a little psychology to all this. At that, their ears perked up like terriers who had sniffed a rat, and before I knew it, he had whisked me out of the room for a little private time with the girls, or ladies as he called them. And in half an hour I was whisked back in, and the girls, or ladies, were all over me, as if, in fact, they had just brushed up on their Bible stories and recognized the error of their ways. Why didn't you tell us? Asked Jennifer. Were you afraid, poor thing? Said Miranda, taking my hand. What's there to be worried about? Said Jennifer. All you had to do was talk. And the girls, or ladies, were all smothering affection with a capital A, and I looked at Jasper in amazement. He winked and took a bow, and there I was again in Shangri-La, quicker than I'd ever imagined, except that even given allowances for dealing with a rift, something seemed a bit odd. I just couldn't put my finger on it. Nonetheless, all the smiles and hugs set me at ease enough to set off the raconteur in me, and I had them in stitches over the cats and cat hair and the surgeons, though I left out the bit about pharmaceuticals and glossed over Sabrina's visit. Gary, whispered Miranda, you've got an amazing sister. More than amazing, said Jennifer. Incredible. Well, I could theoretically go along with both of these terms, but I wasn't sure what they meant or how they meant it in relation to me or them. She was just trying to help you. That's how I see it. Probably because she'd have a hard time accepting it, which is perfectly understandable, Gary. It's not the same with us, finished Miranda. It's different. I guess we should have picked up on the clues. God, they were so obvious. I feel like we're more to blame than anyone else, said Jennifer. There was definitely no need for me to act like I was confused. I was confused. And quiet. And apparently quiet and confusion went over big because Miranda and Jennifer were all over me again, and I was ready to jump all over them out of gratitude and other sensations. But Jennifer stopped me at the threshold of the master and mistress suite. Gary, we'd love to, but you don't have to prove anything to us. Just be yourself. Take your time. We'll do whatever we can, and we won't take anything personally. We'll figure a way to make it work out. Be brave. Miranda gave me another hug, and as soon as I got into the spare bed in the room filled with footwear, I called Jasper, frantic. What did you say to them? I said, trying not to shout. Pipe down. Emilia's trying to sleep. Jasper! Gary, what's the problem? You're back. I may be back, but I'm not back in business, that's for sure. Relax. Give it a few weeks. Then they'll be ready for re-entry. Stage 2. Will you please tell me what the hell is going on? And then he told me. He told me that he told the girls that I had finally realized I was gay, and in a last-ditch effort to deny the truth, I had made a couple of bravado attempts with the bimbo and failed miserably. None of that's true, I cried. Of course not. I'm not an extremist when it comes to honesty. Hardly anybody is. Jasper, you son of a bitch. That doesn't sound like gratitude. How could you? It was your only way out, or hopefully in again. Trust me, you owe me big time. Good night. I could feel the wink over the mobile, too. And the more I thought about it as I drifted off to an uneasy sleep, the more I knew he had a point. It took me months of charades to find myself again, but, funny thing, the girls found me and I found them more bewitching than ever. Psychology?